It's nighttime. Under the cover of darkness, it moves forward, careful and silent. Here in crocodile territory, you have to stay sharp, especially when you're this close to the water. But it isn't afraid, doesn't flinch at every rustle or splash. Its target, the clutch of eggs. The smell is so tempting, so strong, it can't resist and starts digging. Suddenly, a female crocodile rises from the water, but even that can't drive it away. It stays at the clutch until the very last moment, until those massive jaws are just a few feet away and the danger becomes quite real. Then it retreats, but only because it's smarter. It knows it'll be back. This clutch is doomed. The eggs will be eaten the moment the time is right and the female lets her guard down. It'll claim its prize. It's a raccoon, and it's a crocodile killer, striking at their most vulnerable moments. But in truth, the real crocodile killer, the one capable of wiping out the whole population, isn't outside the nest, but inside it. Extinction has already begun. An unobtrusive reminder to do that thing under the video. The scene I just described was actually observed by scientists who'd set up cameras near the nests of American crocodiles in the Florida Keys. These were camera traps, and they were recording raccoons rummaging around a crocodile's nest while the female was away. The idea was pretty simple. The scientists measured a reaction time, meaning how quickly a raccoon backed off once a crocodile appeared on the horizon and entered the frame. That's how they measured the animal's boldness. The shorter the reaction time, the bolder the raccoon, since it stayed by the nest until the crocodile got really close. 3 raccoon-crocodile encounters showed reaction times of 8 seconds, 6 seconds, and 4 seconds before the crocodile appeared in the shot. But there was another case that involved a raccoon with a radio collar. This one retreated with literally 0 seconds left before the crocodile appeared. In other words, it barely escaped an attack. Later, this same bold raccoon was caught on camera again, successfully raiding the crocodile's nest. That meant a complete loss of the clutch for the reptile, which, by the way, is a threatened species. But the raccoon couldn't care less. And in fact, this incident turned out to be the first recorded case of a raccoon raiding a crocodile's nest on Key Largo. In other parts of the crocodile's range, though, it had already been documented more than once. That said, raccoons don't just cross paths with crocodiles, but with alligators too, because they live in the same swamps. In 2015, for instance, one of these encounters gave us this rare photo. No, it isn't Photoshop, and AI had nothing to do with it. Experts examined the shot closely and decided it was a random but very lucky coincidence. Most likely, the raccoon just mistook the crocodile for a bit of solid ground and stepped on it by accident. Imagine how shocked the crocodile must have been. But much more often, these encounters are nothing like the vibes of a Disney cartoon. Usually, they're brutally natural and come down to eating each other. Raccoons go after alligator eggs and babies, and when the alligators grow up, they'll happily eat raccoons of any age. Circle of life and all that. However, it's important to note one thing. The research on crocodiles and raccoons was, of course, focused on crocodiles and raccoons. Yet the scientists were also studying someone else. This is Toxoplasma gondii, a parasitic protozoan with both intermediate and final hosts. It's long been known that the parasite makes several species bolder, pushing them toward their final destination, a member of the feline family. While Toxoplasma is deadly for many intermediate and non-target hosts, early studies showed that infected rodents tend to react more slowly to stimuli, show a strange attraction to cat urine, and generally behave unpredictably. All of this proves that infected prey basically provokes predators to attack. Moreover, Toxoplasma has been linked to other harmful behavioral changes in wild animals, like the so-called dopey fox syndrome in Australia. It may cause boldness that lowers cub survival rates in spotted hyenas. Those cubs are more likely to interact with lions. And just recently, Toxoplasma was tied to boldness in gray wolves. It was precisely this trait that helped them rise to leadership in Yellowstone National Park. And while this last case seems to suggest a positive effect of the protozoan, usually nothing good comes of being too bold. Essentially, animals lose their caution, and the fewer options they have in a dangerous situation, the slimmer their chances of survival. As for the raccoons we started with, all of them turned out to be infected with this parasite. Scientists suggested that their boldness might have been the result of toxoplasmosis, and so it went beyond ordinary raccoon daring. In general, raccoons are curious and not too timid, and that's what their adaptability relies on. But everything has its limit. Another hypothesis was put forward saying that infection with toxoplasma is a bit like Simpson's paradox. On a small scale, it looks beneficial, but overall it harms the population. And if you're wondering why a parasite would need extra boldness, the answer is pretty straightforward. A parasite changes the host's behavior because it's beneficial for it. That's part of its life cycle. The thing is, cats get infected with Toxoplasma gondii only when they eat infected prey. Then the parasite goes through gametogenesis in the cat's intestines, and that leads to the release of fecal oocysts. They then get into the bodies of intermediate hosts, and the cycle has to repeat. But the intermediate host still has to be eaten by a cat. In other words, it's crucial for the parasite to get inside the ultimate host. How do you do that? Sit inside some rodent and make it bold to the point of suicide so it ends up in a cat's stomach. Well, inside a raccoon, the parasite just acts out of habit. It produces something like a side effect. And although raccoons hunt alligator and crocodile eggs without any toxoplasma, the parasite makes them do it more often and act more recklessly. You could say it knocks out the raccoon's self-preservation instinct. But could raccoons, emboldened by parasites, really wipe out an entire crocodile population? The study with raccoons and crocodiles was published in March 2025, that is, just recently. And even though the U.S. doesn't have an objective quantitative measure of toxoplasmosis incidence, Florida is one of the states where it's especially common. Texas, California, and New York are also in that top list. This, by the way, aligns perfectly with earlier studies. They pointed to a higher prevalence of toxoplasmosis among rural populations and a higher risk from environmental exposure. Well, that's statistics on people, but people get infected through water, food, or animals, which means where people often catch it, animals often do too. For example, it's known that between 2014 and 2018, as many as 11 kangaroos died from toxoplasmosis in a Florida zoo. Yes, you can't really say that cases of Toxoplasma gondii infection in Florida are on the rise because in the U.S., toxoplasmosis isn't a nationally notifiable disease. In other words, there's simply no surveillance data. But even the cases that are known suggest that infection is happening increasingly more, and crocodiles, by the way, already have a tough time as it is. It was only in 2007, quite recently, that the American crocodile in Florida was moved from endangered to threatened. That was a huge win for the species. Since being listed in 1975, its population more than doubled and its range expanded. Sounds great? It certainly does. People helped a bit too, buying up land and protecting key nesting sites. So the population had just started bouncing back when a new threat appeared on the horizon, and the more often raccoons get infected with the parasite, the more eagerly they'll eat crocodile eggs. By the way, some scientists believe that the raccoon is actually the most dangerous natural predator of crocodile nests in the Americas. But of course, it's not the only one. Besides raccoons, nests are also raided by coyotes, foxes, skunks, and other scavenging mammals. Even black bears in southern Florida join in on the destruction, not to mention large predatory ants, crabs, and vultures. In short, crocodile eggs and hatchlings are a prized meal for a whole range of Florida species. At the same time, a female crocodile lays eggs only once a year, and losing an entire nest is a serious blow for such a vulnerable species. American crocodiles reach sexual maturity only when they're 6 to 8 feet long, which means about 8 to 10 years of age. That means before a female crocodile produces her first offspring, she has to survive for quite a long stretch. It's nothing like wild boars, which breed year-round and are ready to have young just 6 months after birth. Crocodiles are slow, and that's where the threat to the species comes from. And when a raccoon destroys a crocodile nest, it wipes out 30 to 70 individuals that might have stopped the decline. And by the way, this doesn't just happen in Florida. Texas alligators are also at risk. According to the Texas wildlife officials, a well-placed trail camera recently caught a daring animal that decided to risk it all and snatch an egg from a female alligator's nest. Take a wild guess what the animal was. In the nighttime footage posted on August 6th, you can see the female alligator sitting on her nest, hidden among tall grass and leaves. The nest wasn't hidden well enough, but the mother was guarding it. Sadly, that wasn't enough to keep it safe from a raccoon. The alligator took a defensive stance, but even the size difference and sharp teeth didn't make a difference. The raccoon was smarter, watching and waiting until the female went off to hunt for food, and then the little thief pounced on its prize. One egg was stolen, and the raccoon quickly vanished with it into the dark. But if it's any consolation, the alligator probably still had plenty left. They usually lay between 20 and 30 eggs per season. On the other hand, that raccoon surely wasn't the only one around, and gators have more than raccoons to worry about. Green iguanas and American crocodiles nest together on Slothia, a small island in Gatun Lake, Panama. Scientists who observed 3 breeding seasons noted that crocodiles often attack iguanas. Moreover, the collected data showed that the crocodile came out of the water much more often when iguanas were near its nest. 12 attacks were recorded, 5 iguanas were eaten, 5 escaped, and the fate of 2 is unknown. But attacking wasn't necessary because just the presence of a crocodile on the clearing disturbed the iguana's nesting activity. Meanwhile, the iguanas focused on the crocodile's nest and dug up its eggs. Keep that in mind, and let's move back to Florida. It's hard to get exact numbers of iguanas in Florida. However, the Wildlife Commission says that since the 1960s, lizards have been spotted more often than before. While they used to be found only in Miami-Dade County, they now live across much of the southern and southwestern parts of the state, as well as in some areas of the Panhandle. There's no mystery here. Iguanas thrive in Florida thanks to the state's subtropical climate, its ever-growing population, and the lack of natural predators. This gives the lizards both shelter and food. The only thing holding them back from spreading north is the slightly colder weather. At the same time, iguanas aren't harmless little critters. First, they eat plants and dig tunnels that can wash out and damage sidewalks, dams, and house foundations. Second, their droppings can be found just about anywhere, on sidewalks, porches, patios, decks, and even in pools. It's not just gross. Iguanas can carry salmonella. Overall, there are so many iguanas in Florida that homeowners are now encouraged to kill them when they find them on their property. No permits even required. Iguanas are no longer just escaped pets. They're now a full-blown invasive species, numbering in the hundreds of thousands. And while there haven't been reports of iguanas raiding the nests of Florida's crocodiles and alligators yet, that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. It's very possible these raids just go unseen, which means an iguana can definitely be considered a threat. The crocs that raccoons leave behind will be finished off by iguanas, and if not, panthers will, because they've joined the party too. In this footage, for example, a Florida panther decided to climb into a nest for the eggs, and try to stop it if you dare. It's known that even much larger Mississippi alligators, ranging from 18 to 60 inches, fall prey to the Florida panther. On March 14, 2008, an alligator measuring 106 inches was found. It too had been killed and eaten by a male panther. This one became the largest recorded case to date. All these examples highlight how crocodiles can be vulnerable to felines, as if they didn't have enough weaknesses. Anyway, the truth is, when it comes to crocodiles or alligators, you don't really imagine them ending up as prey to anyone. They're big reptiles with thick skin, a massive bite, and long teeth, and all that didn't just appear by accident. If we went back 200 million years, we'd find that crocodiles basically looked the same. Today, there are only 25 species of crocodiles and about 11,000 species of birds, even though birds showed up in the fossil record millions of years later. But birds evolved and became insanely diverse. Crocodiles didn't bother with that. They held on to their signature traits for millions of years because those traits kept them alive. Fossilized crocodiles from the Jurassic period already have everything modern crocodiles have. They have long snouts, thick tails, rough, scaly skin, hardly any differences. So it was actually the crocodiles with their slow-paced evolution that had the better chance to survive as long as there wasn't external pressure. The ones that tried to speed up went extinct. The others found a kind of equilibrium. They were both efficient and versatile, a kind of perfected form that didn't really need changing. Sure, there were small tweaks just to fit certain environments, But in one respect, crocodiles still got it wrong. Alligators in North Carolina and Texas survive the cold by diving into pond water and letting it freeze around them. Only their noses and front teeth poke through the ice. That's how alligators breathe while waiting for warmer weather. A few alligators were actually found frozen inside giant blocks of ice at the Swamp Park, a tourist attraction and alligator sanctuary in North Carolina. Just to be clear, this is totally normal. Alligators survive low temperatures by going into a state of torpor called brumation. It's like a cold-blooded reptile version of hibernation, similar to what mammals do. Once the temperature drops enough for water to freeze, alligators assume the typical nose-up posture. Their metabolism slows down and their bodies gradually sink into the water with eyes closed. In reality, though, alligators and other reptiles don't fall into a deep sleep during hibernation. They even have periods of activity so they can drink. Still, it's basically hibernation. And during the critical phase, an alligator's heart can slow to 3 beats a minute. In Florida, this starts as soon as the temperature drops below 70 degrees Fahrenheit. At this point, digesting food gets tough and the reptiles just wait for spring. And yeah, on the one hand, it's a pretty cool adaptation to survive the cold, but on the other, brumation is a very vulnerable state, and if someone attacked an alligator during this time, could it even fight back? True, there's no solid evidence of attacks at this stage, but I do know exactly which animal would take advantage of the moment. Say hi to the jaguar, and the jaguar couldn't care less that some alligators are considered evolutionary perfect. The jaguar attacks and wins. It might sound strange, but jaguars often hunt big, dangerous prey like caimans. The explanation is actually simple. Caimans are abundant in many South American ecosystems where jaguars live. The spectacled caiman and the Paraguayan caiman exist in large populations in South American wetlands, and their sheer numbers make them convenient prey for wild cats. Jaguars, by the way, are great swimmers and feel totally at ease in water. And while caimans can be more dangerous than other reptiles, small mammals, or birds, they're just easier to get. So jaguars are happy to put in extra effort to get a guaranteed meal. But it's worth saying that just because some prey is abundant doesn't mean wildcats can hunt it. For example, a lion is unlikely to kill a fully grown giraffe on the African savanna, although lion attacks on giraffes are known. However, in the case of jaguars and caimans, jaguars are specially built to hunt big crocodiles. They're strong and agile swimmers. In this ecosystem, which is prone to seasonal flooding, jaguars live a semi-aquatic life, and it's in the water that caimans are most often encountered. But jaguars have another key difference from most other wildcats. Unlike the rest, jaguars are specifically adapted to hunting neotropical reptiles. Besides caiman, there have been recorded cases of jaguars hunting very large crocodiles, like the Orinoco crocodile. They also prey on turtles and tortoises, and sometimes even boas and anacondas. How did they learn to do that? Well, through evolution. After the last ice age ended, the population of large animals that once roamed the tropical American savannas sharply declined. There used to be big camelids, giant sloths and armadillos, tapirs as big as a house, and capybaras as big as bears. In short, plenty to choose from. But the prey disappeared, and jaguars, which have since gotten smaller in size, had to turn to other abundant food sources. And it turned out that large aquatic reptiles fit the bill perfectly. On top of that, jaguars have a special evolutionary feature: incredibly strong jaws. Jaguars have the strongest bite among all wildcats relative to their size. With their powerful jaws, they can easily pierce the skulls of their prey with their large canines, making hunting extremely efficient. And when it comes to hunting a dangerous, thick-scaled animal like a crocodile, precision and strength play a key role. A leap and a bite to the back of the head let the jaguar sever the caiman's brain from the rest of its nervous system, paralyzing it and minimizing risk. One bite and it's over. Of course, it should be said that caimans are generally smaller than crocodiles and alligators. On average, they grow to about 5 to 6.5 feet long, while alligators reach 10 to 13 feet and crocodiles up to 16 feet. Besides size, crocodiles, alligators, and caimans also differ in jaw strength. Crocodiles have the strongest bite, followed by alligators, and then caimans, which are the weakest. So it's much easier for a jaguar to deal with a caiman than with an American crocodile or a Mississippi alligator. But once a jaguar has learned to hunt caimans, it could probably adapt to hunting smaller crocodiles and alligators too. Plus, it's smart enough to take advantage of their vulnerable state during winter and eat reptiles of any size. Yes, they'd be slightly frozen like semi-prepared meals, but still good enough. And there are also tons of invasive animals in Florida, so you have to be glad for the water reptiles that no one ever thought to bring a jaguar here, because it would probably thrive while the survival of all other species would be highly uncertain. But if you've already thought that crocodiles and alligators are on the losing side now, that's not quite the case. Birds, at least, find them scary enough to act as bodyguards for their nests, including against raccoons. For many birds, the main threat to their chicks comes from predators that raid nests, and raccoons and opossums are right up there. That's why lots of wetland birds like storks, herons, ibises, and spoonbills often choose to nest over alligators. It benefits the birds because these fierce reptiles often scare away or even eat smaller predators. These kinds of win-win relationships between reptiles and birds could be widespread throughout the tropics. This means crocodiles and alligators, at least the adults, don't consider raccoons a real threat. And that makes sense. Have you seen raccoons? Even the biggest ones could never stand up to a full-grown crocodile. A raccoon is food, and even a raccoon carrying a parasite knows it. That's why it retreats when it spots a crocodile. The birds are well aware of this too. It's true, it's not clear what the reptiles get out of this cooperation with the birds, and few studies have looked into it. But there are some theories. For example, one of the possible terrifying perks the reptiles might get is food in the form of chicks thrown out of nests. Many birds that nest in colonies lay more eggs than they can actually raise, and usually adjust the size of the brood according to the available food. In other words, if there isn't enough food, they just toss a couple of chicks out of the nest. Researchers believe that these chicks could be a significant source of meat for alligators. Seems weird that huge alligators might really eat tiny chicks, right? Can they really matter that much? Turns out they can. To see how well-fed alligators were in different locations, scientists measured their length and weight and took blood samples to check nutrient levels. They found that alligators living near colonies of water birds ate better than alligators living where there were no colonies. And the difference was noticeable. For example, a 6-foot-long alligator weighed on average about 7 pounds more near a nesting colony than an alligator in a similar habitat without one. So it seems those tossed out chicks do matter. And in this video, there's an alligator just lying under a nest waiting for some food to fall on it. And it will get some. And just when I thought that all the threats to Florida's alligators and crocodiles had already been listed, I suddenly discovered another one. Because the local reptiles could face a new competitor, a bigger and meaner member of the crocodile order. According to a study, Nile crocodiles have already been spotted in the wild in southern Florida. Between 2009 and 2012, scientists recorded reports from residents of the state about unusually looking crocodiles and even caught 3 of these unusual ones. Genetic analysis of tissue samples confirmed that they were invasive Nile crocodiles linked to crocodile populations in South Africa. The female crocodile caught in 2012 was released back into the wild and later caught again in 2014. Not a coincidence, of course. This gave scientists proof that a Nile crocodile had survived and thrived in the Everglades for almost 2 years. Moreover, they found that during this period, the crocodile grew about 28% faster than young Nile crocodiles usually do, which means the conditions in Florida were very comfortable for it. In general, Nile crocodiles usually reach 16 feet in length, but sometimes grow up to 19 feet. A full-grown Nile crocodile is a powerful predator, and it feeds on any large animals it can catch. Zebras, buffalo, really anyone it can swallow whole or tear apart neat. They aren't particularly picky predators. The good news is that so far, researchers haven't found any evidence of established Nile crocodile populations in Florida waters, but that's only so far. Exotic pet trade and demand for Nile crocodiles in zoos provide a constant influx of animals. One day, this could result in a population forming, and then, well, first of all, local and Nile crocodiles would compete for habitat and resources, and the Nile crocodiles would probably win. And secondly, fights between them would probably end in favor of the Niles. So the future for local crocodiles doesn't look too bright. You owe me a like. See you later.